Hello, everyone. Thank you for coming to the talk, Putting a User Behind an iOS Device. This talk is going to focus on how to validate an iOS device, how it was set up, and why it may impact your investigation. So I'm going to dive right in. I am Heather Mahalik, and a little bit about me. I've been a DFRWS for almost 19 years. I am the Senior Director of Digital Intelligence at Celebrate. I'm also a SANS Senior Instructor, course author. I teach the 585 smartphone class. I also teach 500 Windows Forensics, and Battlefield Forensics is something I'm branching into. If you know me, you know that I am obsessed with mobile forensics. I love the research. I love that we always have to learn and all the new things that come from it. In my real life, I am a wife, a mother. You can see the picture of my children here. I love to vacation. Prior to COVID, that was a lot more relevant than it is now. I also love wine, bourbon, all the good things. And honestly, when it comes to the field of DFIR, I feel like I won the lottery. I love my career. I really don't see it as work. It is a lot of fun for me to dig in, research, and share things back. Now, the backstory of this entire presentation. I get a lot of questions asked that come through me through email, listservs, Twitter, you name it. Somehow people find me, LinkedIn. When I get the same question over and over and over again, especially if it's from a student that I have previously taught, I feel like time to research, test, and validate. And this is a cycle that I always run through. It's usually just those first two circles. Answers asked, I research, test, validate, report back. Often I would put it just back into my SANS course, but then I started realizing I need to spread the word. I would on occasion do webinars, and I thought that wasn't good enough. Fast forward to January 2019, Jessica Hyde and I were having dinner, and she said, Heather, you should submit some things to the DFR review. And I remember seeing it on Twitter and thinking, I'm not really sure what that is. So I looked it up and I said, you know what? I just wrote a blog. I'm going to submit it. I don't know how relevant it is, but we'll see. So that's how this all came about. A question was repeatedly asked. I did the research, the testing, and the validation. And then I realized DFR review was born. The fact that DFR review was born is a huge impact to me. And I'll share that with you in a moment on why. So let's start talking about these questions. And all the questions come in different forms because we're all types of examiners. How I would ask something may not be asked the same way if you're working a murder investigation versus a corporate theft investigation per se. Baseline of these questions, how do I know if a user wiped a device? How do I know if a user wiped a device and restored data? How do I know if the user restored a new device or wiped device from iTunes or iCloud? What if a user buys a device and starts from scratch as a brand new user? And how do I know the date on when all of this is occurring? These questions kept coming in over and over and over. And I would respond and say, this is what I think. That is not often good enough. You have to think in this field, we will out there into the wild that people will testify to. And that's something that really spurred that conversation I was having with Jessica. It terrifies me when someone comes up and says, oh, I testified to something you taught me. And I always think, I hope you validated it, because every human can make a mistake. What if my research isn't good enough? That is why the DFR review is key. I want to be able to say, not only did I do this, I came up with this test, this reasoning, the question, someone validated. And not only someone, but many people looked at my methodologies and figured out how this went down and what the truth is. My methodology is shared here. The first thing I do is I gather test devices. And as you can see behind me, I have many test devices, and I rely heavily on them. I try to do multiple models and versions for Apple specific. And since this is based on how an iPhone was set up, I will strictly stay with Apple. You need a test plan. What do you intend to do? What is the point of your test? If it involves wiping, guess what? You're going to have to wipe that device. So I recommend doing your test initially and then doing a wipe and looking for differences. You have to decide which type of tools you want to use. I will commonly use anything that is free. For this test, I decided to use iTunes. I encrypted the backup, and then I used iBackupBot for parsing because I wanted people to be able to do the same things I was doing without a commercial tool. And you will see some screenshots coming up. Now, the key thing here meant every single step. I learned this the hard way. For many years, I would do testing and validation and not document, and then I had to go back and do it again because I remember what was actually being tested. You can see here, I just did, and this is ridiculous, this is my notebook. So in my notebook here, I just did an app usage test and which apps I was using, times I was using them, and I'm kind of old school in the fact that I write it down. And I love to keep that documentation because if anyone ever comes back and says, Heather, are you sure you used Snapchat at this time? I can say, yes, I documented it and I know exactly what I did. Then you have to review your results. Now you have to be prepared for not being able to find, for it not to make sense, and you have to do it multiple times. And that's what I found. So I did isolate and find my file of interest, and you have multiple files. My file of interest was the Calm Apple Purple Buddy plist. That is the one that stored the answers that I was looking for. Now, when I go to the next slide, you'll see I had to go back and forth a little bit in my testing. I had to re-wipe devices and see how these devices were set up. And I did a separate blog on that. So the paper that I am referencing, that I'm going to give you the link to at the end, this DFRWS paper was strictly on after a device is wiped or brand new and you get it out of the box. How can you tell how the user set it up? And you know when they did. Now, when I did this review, Checkmate did not exist as an exploit that I was aware of. So I did not jailbreak the device. If you did jailbreak the device, you will see coming up in the slides, the data arc plist can also be used, and it references Purple Buddy right in it. It tells you. So you do all these cool things and you're like, great, I've done this research. Now this final bullet is what scares a lot of people. Share it. This is our duty in DFIR. We need to be sharing with one another. Even if what you share, if you get pushback on it, let's say you go through the DFIR review and you get feedback saying, this doesn't work the same for me, or have you considered this? That is excellent feedback. That is something we all need to hear because we all think differently. Being an examiner in digital forensics really makes you an artist. And I say that all the time. We need to make sure that even though we come across artifacts in a different way, that the answers are consistent and are the same and are factual. So one of the vows I made to myself after talking to Jessica that night is I do too many things that are live. I will do a live webinar that I hope someone stumbles upon. And then I realized documentation is kind of key here. So I vowed that I would blog more, share more, and document. And this is the perfect opportunity to do things like that. So that's exactly what I did. Here is an example of my findings from the paper. Now, something you need to keep in mind, I tested this when the testing questions came in, iOS 12 was out. All my testing was done in iOS 12. I do recommend you validate this. I did verify in iOS 13, but something that was new in iOS 13 for me is when I bought this phone, I was able to set it up directly from another iPhone. So I'm going to give some recommendations at the end if you're interested, and this maybe piques your interest. If you want to dive in and try these things, you too can do this. So my findings, this is that Calm Apple Purple Buddy plist, and you can see two little snippets of it here. So on the left-hand side, we can see that we have setup state. That is the key thing you want to search for in these playlists. And here I'm just using a free tool called Playlist Editor. It works on Mac, it works on PC. Again, trying to keep things free. If I backtrack just a tiny bit, I did do an encrypted iTunes backup. I'm stressing encrypted iTunes backup. Starting with iOS 13, if you do not encrypt, you do not get files of interest. And I recommend you go out and you read my blogs that I wrote on this. Actually, the blog I wrote, Won't You Back That Thing Up, was nominated or is nominated for the Forensic Forecast Awards, which by the time I'm actually recording this right now, but just in case, maybe I won, maybe I didn't, we shall see. But regardless, I hope you read it because it does talk about encrypting the actual backups and why that's important. So I did iTunes encrypted backup. I set up the device the first time using iTunes. And what you can see on the left-hand side, it says set up using Assistant. On iOS 12, that is what it looked like when I used iTunes. Now, I've had previous versions actually used to say set up iTunes. So this is where you have to validate. Do these simple tests. And my paper documents every single step I took so that you can replicate it. So then I wipe the device and I start all over again. And this time I restore from iCloud. You see on the right-hand side, you can see I restored from iCloud. And do you also notice there are some date timestamps in there where it says guest country, and then it says at 9/18/2018, 7:49. And then you can see up top, we have a setup last exit on 9/1/13/47/31. Now think about this. When you're setting up your device, there are things that some people don't finish where it says like your iCloud account information and other things up top, or maybe you don't set up payment. So I started setup on 9/18/2018 at 9:57, and I made another change or finished the setup according to Apple on 9/21. And some people would say, how do you finish setup days later? Think about it. If you don't go in, wallet kind of always haunts you to finish and set up your wallet. Do you want to make sure iCloud's syncing? Do you want to go in and change anything? Doesn't need your Apple ID again, password. So those things definitely could be affecting it. So step 1, encrypted iTunes backup. Step 2, go and Apple Purple Buddy plist and iBackup bot. Step 3, I exported it out and looked at it in a plist editor. And then wipe, start again. And that's frustrating things when you have to wipe a device and you're like, oh, so I would keep a backup separately and say which stages it was in, like pre-wipe device and take a look. Wiped and then set up with iTunes, and then create additional backup. Wiped, restored with iCloud. So these are all the things you have to consider because documentation is key again. Why this all matters, and honestly why I submitted to do this talk, peer review and validation remove much pressure off of you. Think about this. Do some research and maybe you test it on one and no one validates it. And then someone is either free or goes to prison based upon your research. How sure are you that you're correct? I like knowing that other people in this career field went through this and validated my research. It's very, very important. It relieves so much pressure on me when other people say, yeah, I did that. And often you'll find if I ever or respond to an email, I will send you some, please validate this. Or here are some simple steps that you should do to also make sure that everything I've told you here stands true. What you write may impact a lot of investigations. And this is actually good too. And please don't stress about it becoming data, because I thought about this. And when I was talking to Jess submitting for this review, I was like, what if it's not relevant anymore? That was a long time. I was one of the first papers published through the DFRWS review. I wanted it to be relevant. Do you know how many times I'm still asked the question, how do I know if a device was set up? And you know what I do? I point to the paper, which is coming up in the slide, and I say, read that and try it on a new device. Every bit is a simple way for you to get your name out there. So let's say you want to do some research and you want to get through this DFRWS review process and you want to add to it. You can actually do that. You can take what I did on iOS 12 and you can update that research. Do the same thing for iOS 14. Better yet, try it for 13 and 14. Think about things I haven't done. And these are recommendations that you'll actually read in the paper. What if the person restores from another device? Like I said, when I got this one and I set up from my old one, what does that actually look like? What if the device does not successfully restore? What if there is an error? What does Purple Buddy look like? What if it's set up through iTunes or iCloud at all, and the person wipes it and uses that as a brand new person? What if they use it as a brand new person, but then log in with their old Apple ID at some point? How does that look? So right there are 4 different tests that you can take and run with and go with and do. Does the data arc plist exactly Purple Buddy plist? Now remember, DataArc is from a jailbroken extraction. So checkra1n or checkmate. From my comparisons, it did. And before I go into my final slide and answer questions, I just want to take time to say special thanks to the people who peer reviewed my work on this. I know some of you, I don't know all of you, but I appreciate every single one of you for your time, your dedication. DFRWS is always looking for volunteers. So if you even just want to get more experience with looking at people's research, put your name out there, dive in. The answer is always ask. And it's one of the best things we can do to educate the community, get our name out there, is share, 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 and research, research, research. Now with that, how to contact me. I'm going to take time for questions, and I think I only get like 3 minutes or so. So if I do not get to your question, please email me. Heather@Cellebrite.com is the best way. I blog on smarterforensics.com, also blog for Cellebrite. So if you go to the Cellebrite site under resources, you'll see tons of videos on Ask the Expert, on the YouTube channel, all my Tip Tuesdays, everything that I try to put out there, because like I said at the beginning, I am trying to put more things on paper. Now this paper, you can see the long link there. I also did a shortened link. So if you go to FOR585.com/DFRWS, you will find that DFR publication that's listed there in orange. And as always, I'm on Twitter. I try to remain active. LinkedIn is probably my biggest weakness. I do follow it. I'm trying to get better at it. But if you have a question, you want help on research, you just need some motivation, please reach out to me, because we are only as strong as the people who are willing to give back in this community. Thank you for listening to my talk. I will now take time for questions. And again, if I don't get to your question, please reach out. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of the conference.